Hello and welcome to another episode in the capture part of the texture series. And here I show you some footage done with an DSLR, so there is a little bit wobbly inside the footage, sorry for that. What I want to do here is to show you when we want to capture this wall here. And as my rule of thumb, go as far as possible away from the wall, so the sidewalk here wouldn't be a good place, because then we would have the need for many shots or for a wide angle shot, and that is a lot of work and not really my suggestion. So the other street side was my target, my point of view, and of course the cars were always in front of it. No way to do this. I have chosen this place, of course, to demonstrate the problems here. And you can imagine that we see all the time something from the wall, but never all at once. So I want to show you today here two different ways to overcome those problems. And of course, we have seen one of the solutions, and I want to discuss another one. So let's get started. I stay here in Lightroom, and to make my point, I have chosen, of course, the worst case scenario here. I have to admit, if I had waited long enough, I would have found certainly one time frame here. But as the time is always limited, you have to deal with what you get, and that is, of course, here the challenge. Otherwise, I couldn't demonstrate this here. So we have here a picture where we can see at least here a little bit of the wall, and then we have another one where we can see nearly everything, but of course someone needed to go into my picture, and then we have here exactly everything that we need to cover the guy in the picture, and that helps you, of course, in a good way. And this is the first case, so just load them all in a stack, make a mask, and you are fine, you get your material. And I do not tell you that I have done here anything along the book, because I have no color checker here in the picture. I have not really taken care of anything else than just to demonstrate here the point. So please focus only on this part here. I stay here in Lightroom, and to make my point, I have chosen, of course, the worst case scenario here. I have to admit, if I had waited long enough, I would have found certainly one time frame here. But as the time is always limited, you have to deal with what you get, and that is, of course, here the challenge. Otherwise, I couldn't demonstrate this here. So we have here a picture where we can see at least here a little bit of the wall, and then we have another one where we can see nearly everything, but of course someone needed to go into my picture, and then we have here exactly everything that we need to cover the guy in the picture, and that helps you, of course, in a good way. And this is the first case, so just load them all in a stack, make a mask, and you are fine, you get your material. And I do not tell you that I have done here anything along the book, because I have no color checker here in the picture. I have not really taken care of anything else than just to demonstrate here the point. So please focus only on this part here. Before we go to Photoshop and take a look how we could solve this, and that is then in the practical part in detail, here I will go only to the results. Let's have a look to the other method, and that is time-based. And I show you here clearly that we can see a lot of motion blur, and I guess there was some chrome in it that gave me here the super bright highlights. And it obscures, of course, the whole information that I wanted to have. So just to go ahead and have a long exposure is not always helping here. And we can have even the opposite. When the car is very slow here, we get some green tint from a green car here in it. And that was not really helpful. Let's have a look here. And let's have as well a look how I have shot it. When you take a look to these numbers here, when I hover over this, we can see I have a long lens, 200 millimeters, and I have set it up to f32. That's normally not my suggestion at all. And so I could reach finally 6 seconds while I have used an ND filter. And the ND filter was 1.8. That means it's 6 stop of light reduction. So we had here quite some reduction of light based on the aperture and the ND. And this results normally when we use an ND filter that high that we get infrared pollution on the sensor. And we have to use an infrared cut filter. That means we see everything except infrared. Otherwise, we would have in the blacks a lot of reddish tones. And from the ND filter and that high, we get a lot of green spill or some other spill in the picture based on the brand that you use. I wouldn't use variable ND filters because they are based on polarization effects. And that is, of course, not really something that I would suggest because it takes some other effects in the picture. They are very comfortable to use, and when you have to run and gun, this is more than often the only way to do it. But I use singular ND stop filters. That means I have to swap them out and I have more precision in it. And I can reproduce this very precisely after that. So the next picture has a little bit more of this again in it, and the third picture here in a row has less. And let's have a look what we get out of these images here, case 1 and case 2 in Photoshop. The first case that we have discussed was the one where we had always a little bit visibility and where the time was pretty much short, so even a driving car wouldn't have a lot of motion blur in it. And one important thing is, of course, that we use manual time, not automatic here, and certainly not automatic focus, because each car would throw off the time or the exposure and the focus system. So manual here, of course, first choice. And when we take a look here, this picture has nearly no value to us, perhaps sometimes when we need exactly this spot. So let's take a look to the other one where I have here this guy, and we have underneath that picture where we have the car here with the shadow and all of that. So when we put these two in conjunction, and I have created here a little mask already, which you can see here, very simple, very fast, and that gives us then exactly what we need. And of course here also the tripod needs to be absolutely stable. That can't be just a little flimsy tripod that every little wind or movement shakes a little bit, because we want to have here pixel precision, and that is even with a very expensive one not very simple to do. So this went relatively well. I would have some problems here in this area. The tripod has certainly got a little bump. I can't remember that, but this is certainly fixable. Anyway, the next example is admittedly the worst case scenario, and I do not expect anything happened here. But I thought give it a shot, and it's of course very interesting to see what happens here with all these stripes. And this stack of images is set at the moment to median, and I tried also minimum, which gave me this example here. And I see here it looks like someone painted a very watery color over it. Not nice painting. And the mean, of course, puts everything in a mix, and everything that was already white will influence the picture. So not at all a solution. The second example with the time-based images was done, of course, not to create a worst case scenario, but also to select images where I see problems. And again, I choose here stuff where we have problems. It's not that I'm not able to do this, it's just to demonstrate this here. And of course, there is always a short moment where you can see a little bit more, or when a traffic light goes red and the cars slow down, you can capture, as seen in the example, a little bit here, a little bit there. But I wanted to showcase this, of course. So 3 examples here, all set to normal and 100%. We can see here someone had the brake lights on and something white was maybe on the roof here. And then we have this case where we have a green car slowly crawling through my image. I can't say which one it was, but it's a turquoise, bluish, greenish, whatever runs through it. And I see here some white tint. And the third image, that is of course pretty clear. We have here something on top where we have no interest at all in it, because the wall was our interest, but this here is completely out of the question. So we have to find an answer between these two guys here, and the simplest way is of course to check out the darken method, and this leaves us here only with a little bit of color tint. This area here looks fairly well. I have a little bit problem here, and I have no information in this area. Oh, I have a little bit, so I could put this here on top of it, and with the option key down I give it a black mask, so this picture here is not visible at all. And now I can take here just a brush, and with Control and Option key I increase here my size. I shouldn't take the chalk, I should take here something like this, and let's have a look. Command C to get this back here again. And opacity 61 looks nice, so I can paint here over it, and I get here maybe something from this picture back into it. Opacity a little bit down to eliminate too much spill here. And I think I could live with that, but of course I have here a little problem, and perhaps in the shadow I can just stamp this out. Perhaps I won't use the shadow at all. Anyway, I want to introduce you here to some techniques, and I think I have caught all the possible problems that we have. And last but not least, I want to tell you, of course, I wouldn't use here any automatic while shooting. First of all, no focus automatic, because we want to have the wall here. So what I like to do normally is press one time the shutter button and have a look if the focus is really done. And if that is not the case, I go to 10x magnification in my preview screen and take a little detail and do it manually. And then I switch off autofocus. Keep in mind that sometimes the autofocus, when you have only some spots in it, are connected to your exposure value. And to shut it off means you flip down back to middle exposure. Get savvy with your camera, because every camera is different, and so I can give you here only a little hint. And exposure is of course very important. Don't use automatic exposure. When the cars drive you through, and perhaps there's a big black car, then the camera thinks, oh, we need much more light, so the time goes longer, or the exposure, the aperture goes up, and so on, and the whole wall gets blown out. Or if there is a silvery metal car, then the wall might get darker. So manual is here key. You can take the automatic to your advantage for the first test shots, but I would go then with the experience from these automatic shots into manual mode and get done what I need. So I try to keep the capture parts short, and I say thank you for listening. Have fun with it.